how robotics are transforming manufacturing, AI and the future of jobs, and agentic AI. Those are just a few of the topics we're going to cover here in episode 215 of Transformation Ground Control.
Welcome to Transformation Ground Control. Ground Control. The podcast that covers everything related to digital transformation. This podcast features technology agnostic and international discussions related to digital strategy, software selection, implementation, change management, business process optimization, and everything else you need to know to make your digital transformation project successful. Whether you're embarking on an ERP implementation, supply chain transformation, or any other business or digital transformation, this podcast is for you. Now, here's your host, Eric Kimberling.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Ground control to Major Tom.
Hello, welcome to Transformation Ground Control, the podcast that covers everything related to digital transformation. This is a tech agnostic, independent, and objective view of the digital transformation space. My name is Eric Kimberling. I'm the CEO of Third Stage Consulting. We're an independent consulting firm that helps clients throughout the world with their digital transformation journeys. And joining me, as always, is our co-host, Darian Chwialkowski. Darian, thanks for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Got a really fun episode for you all planned here today. It's going to be a great discussion, very robotics and AI centric, you could say. It's almost a robotics and AI episode, really. We're gonna start off with some social media questions, but then we're going to get into some newsworthy topics. One being AI and the future of jobs. We're going to talk about SAP S/4HANA migrations, and then we're going to have the CIO of a company called Boston Dynamics on the show later. He's going to be on to talk about how robotics are transforming manufacturing. So we'll get into robotics and specific use cases around how robotics are being used. And when we talk about robotics here with Chad, we're not just talking about some of the automated equipment that have been around for decades. We're talking about really new and innovative ways of using robotics in manufacturing and distribution centers and other supply chain related use cases. So be sure to stick around for that. We'll have him on the show. And actually, he's also a client of ours. So Chad and the Boston Dynamics team have hired Third Stage Consulting to help with their ERP implementation journey. Although that's not what we're going to talk about with them. We're going to talk about the product that they produce or that they manufacture, which is robotics. So stay tuned for that. That's going to be a great conversation. And then later in the show, we'll talk about whether or not agentic AI might replace human decision-making and humans in their jobs. So we'll talk about that later in the show as well. But before we jump into some of these other topics, what are some of the recent social media questions we've gotten, Darian?
Yeah, some good questions today. They're also about AI, funny enough. But this first one is, I think we're still in 1995 when comparing today's AI with the internet history so far. We're amazed with what we have so far, and we know there's so much more to come. The only difference is that it will be way beyond exceptional. Yes, in 30 years' time, we will be completely useless. And I wanted to get your take on that last little part there about being completely useless.
Yeah, I mean, when you think about AI, it's such a relatively new technology. I mean, it's been around for a long time, the technology itself, but as far as just real mass adoption, I mean, it's really just been in the last 2 or 3 years. So you figure, we've got decades of evolution behind or ahead of us with AI. So I don't think any of us really fully understand what AI is going to look like in the future. All I know is the more I get to use it, the more we see our clients using it, the more we learn about AI, the more you realize, wow, we are just scratching the surface in terms of how we can use it. And I think that goes for us all as individuals, on a personal level, but I think it's especially true for organizations too. I think organizations and in their transformation endeavors are just starting to think about and just starting to test some basic stuff and basic uses of AI. Of course, there's exceptions to that. There's companies like, Amazon and Apple and Google and some of these other companies that have been using AI forever, and it's nothing new to them, and they're way ahead of all of us in terms of their adoption of it. But generally speaking, I think most organizations are pretty far behind or have a lot to learn and a lot to adopt when it comes to AI. So I agree with the person. I mean, I think we'll look back at 2025 someday and say, wow, remember back then when all we could really do with AI was, A, B, and C, and now we can do X, Y, and Z, or you tell your kids someday that, back when, before you were even born, this is what AI looked like, and it probably won't even be recognizable to our kids. So it's exciting to see where it heads from here.
Yeah, absolutely. The second question is also about AI, but this one kind of is more on like AI making decisions. So if AI is making purchasing decisions, how does it impact SOX controls? What spending authority does AI have?
Yeah, that's a good question. I actually saw that pop into one of the social media channels, and I thought it was an interesting question. So it's SOX stands for Sarbanes-Oxley. Sometimes it's referred to as SOX. And Sarbanes-Oxley is a U.S. regulation for U.S.-based publicly traded companies, or I should say companies that are publicly traded on the U.S. stock exchange. They have to be Sarbanes-Oxley compliant, which means there's different controls that these organizations have to have in place, different segregation of duties to make sure that you don't have fraud and misuse of company funds. So, for example, one example of something that Sarbanes-Oxley would crack down on would be is if I could go into my ERP system and create a new vendor and pay that same vendor right away. You can't do that. Sarbanes-Oxley, you have to split out those duties so that, like, Darian, you would have to create the vendor and then I can make a payment, but neither one of us can do both. And the reason for that is because they don't want you or I creating like an LLC called Eric Kimberling LLC, and I pay Eric Kimberling LLC $10 million. So that's what Sarbanes-Oxley is intended to do. So back to the question, how does agentic AI or AI in general decision-making, how does it factor into or consider Sarbanes-Oxley or other regulatory requirements? And I think it's a good reminder that, we still have to train AI, we still have to teach it, and we still have to put parameters around it. So whether it's a regulatory parameter that says, we're not going to allow, certain violations of certain regulations. I mean, you have to teach AI that AI is not going to necessarily know. AI can't necessarily distinguish between right and wrong, at least not at the time of this podcast. Maybe in a couple of years it will. But right now it doesn't know the difference between right and wrong. It doesn't have ethics. It doesn't necessarily understand all legal rules and implications. So it's up to us as humans to put those guardrails in place. So I think that's the way to address it. I don't think we can count on AI to just be compliant with local laws and regulations just because AI is smart. I mean, we have to teach it that stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. That makes sense. Before we get into the newsworthy topic that's talking about AI, I want to switch gears here and just talk about SAP for a second. This is really the only section today we're going to be talking about anything but AI.
Right.
But this topic today is one that we've heard a lot about in the ERP world. And I know that you've been very vocal about, Eric, but it's about the S/4HANA migration. And a recent study just confirmed what a lot of people have been feeling, but it's basically not going smoothly for a lot of companies. And here's what stood out in the article. Only 8% of companies have completed their S/4HANA migration on time. Over 60% ran into issues with budget, timeline, and result quality. And even after go live, 65% experienced severe quality problems, most tied to poor project planning, weak testing, and expanding scope mid-project. And maybe the most surprising is that only 30% are using public cloud, even though that's SAP's preferred route. Most are sticking to private cloud or on-prem, suggesting that a lot of customers are hesitant to fully adopt to SAP's roadmap. This really raises the question, is the 2027 or the 2030 deadline now even realistic? Or are companies rushing into migrations they're not ready for? One question for you, Eric, with only 8% of them finishing on time, is this a software problem or a planning problem or both?
I think it's probably a bit of both. I mean, S/4HANA is a much different product architecture, has a lot different functionality than ECC and some of the other legacy SAP products. I can't think of any in recent years. I can't think of any clients of ours that I can recall that have moved to S/4HANA from a non-SAP product. So it seems like at least from what we're seeing in the market. Like 10 years ago, we saw a lot of companies going from SAP to Oracle or Oracle to SAP or whatever. Now it seems like people that are in the SAP space are the ones that are looking at S4HANA. We don't have a lot of, quite frankly, we don't have a lot of customers that aren't already on an SAP product. We don't have a lot of customers looking at S4HANA, which I find kind of interesting. I'm not sure why that is, but back to your question about this, I think there's a couple things going on here, and this is the part that I've been very vocal about, is anytime you force your customers to do something that they don't want to do, isn't in their best interest, and or doesn't make sense for them, that's usually not going to go well. And I think that's what you're seeing here is you're forcing companies to go through transformations when it's not necessarily the right time for them, but it's important to SAP. So that's SAP's prerogative. They have a business to run. They want to make money just like everyone else, but the way they're going about it, I think, is just going to have horrendous impacts on them long term. I mean, that's my prediction for SAP. Is it's not. I think it's the beginning of the end for SAP. Quite frankly, I think they're going to be the BON of the 2020s and 2030s. If anyone remembers BON, that was the big ERP system back in the 90s. I think it was actually ahead of SAP for some time. When I first started learning about ERP, BON was like the number one ERP system, and now BON is pretty much dead. Infor owns it, but it's not widely used anymore. I think SAP will probably end up there as well. I mean, that's my candid prediction there, just based on where the industry is headed and the way they're totally overplaying their hand, in my opinion. I think they just think because they're SAP, they can do this, but they forget, I think, that they've got some really, really big customers that dwarf SAP as a company and have a lot more leverage. And, you start to see them struggle. These big companies like consumer household names, they start struggling with their S4HANA implementations, or God forbid they fail, which there have been lots of failures and there's going to be a lot more. That's just going to leave a big black eye for SAP, but it's somewhat self-inflicted because, I mean, first of all, the product itself is part of the problem because it is a fairly rigid solution. It's a relatively rigid solution. It's hard to change, especially when you compare S4HANA to ECC. And a lot of the clients we work with have very heavily customized ECC legacy ECC environments. And again, ECC is the legacy SAP product that you could customize. It was on-prem. And a lot of those customers have tailored ECC to fit their needs. Now SAP is trying to get all those same customers to move to S4HANA, which is a lot less flexible. And it sort of forces a certain amount of standardization that is very painful for organizations. So part of it is product-based, but what's even more material, in my opinion, is the fact that SAP is forcing this now. And there's a lot of really pissed off customers too, because we've come across clients that literally just finished their ECC implementations, 3 or 5 years ago, and they haven't even gotten the full ROI that they were expecting in their business case for that initial investment. And now they're being told they have to upgrade. And not to mention the fact that, resources are limited. I mean, you could, for a big, huge company that's going to spend, 50 or 100 or $300 million on a SAP implementation, you have to wonder, well, how many manufacturing plants could they build, or how many stores could they open, or, how many people could they hire to expand into new markets? But instead, you've got this big software vendor that controls all of your back office operations, telling you you've got to spend that money on their solution. And to your point, the risk of success or the odds of success are extremely low. So it's a lose-lose proposition. You're forcing your customers into a high dollar investment that they may or may not be ready for, or may not want, and the odds of them succeeding are extremely low. I just don't see how that's a winning strategy long term.
Yeah, for sure. I would agree with that. Another part of the article I did find really interesting was how the ones that have currently migrated, out of that, only 30% of them have gone to the public cloud, which is what SAP is trying to push. So why do you think so many companies are avoiding SAP's public cloud model? Is it about control, customization, or do you think just trust overall?
It might be a little bit of trust, but I think it's mostly control and functionality. I mean, I think you have to remember that, the blessing and the curse of SAP products in general, and especially with S4HANA, the strength and the weakness is that it's meant to drive standard business processes. I mean, that's the whole point of SAP. That's their whole value proposition. But in doing so, you're forcing a huge amount of shock to the system, to organizations that are deploying the software. And if you're SAP, or if you're one of the big consulting firms that are drinking the SAP Kool-Aid, it's easy enough to say, well, that all you have to do is just change your processes to fit SAP and you're fine. Well, to me, that's okay. That first of all, that's a lot easier said than done. Second of all, that's extremely arrogant to think that, you should just force the entire world to change because your product has certain limitations or certain ways of working. That's just not the way the world should work, in my opinion. So, so I think that's, a challenge there. But I think back to the point of legacy ECC customers, most of them have fairly or highly customized environments because they needed something from the SAP product that it couldn't deliver out of the box. And it's because these are big, massive, diversified companies. One size does not fit all in these organizations. And so there's a certain amount of customization that needed to happen. And you can argue all day that, well, companies shouldn't ever customize, or maybe they customize too much. That may be true. I would say every organization has a right to customize if they want to. That's not up to SAP to decide, what's right or wrong there. That's up to the customer. So if you can't deliver a product that can't be customized or can't be tailored to fit a customer's needs, I think that's the problem, rather than making it the customer's problem because they won't change. Again, to me, that's arrogance. That's misreading the market. It's overplaying your hand. It's all these things. And again, these are huge strategic blunders I think will haunt SAP in years and decades to come. So I'm sorry, now I forgot your question. I'm on this rant and I can't remember what your question was now.
Why customers are just choosing basically to go either private or on-prem versus to the preferred SAP public cloud.
Yeah. So to make the long answer a little bit shorter, the private cloud is more like the on-prem legacy environment. They can with private cloud SAP, you can do more with it. You can, as far as customization and that sort of thing. When you're on public cloud, it's more like the software as a service model, multi-tenant, where multiple companies are using the same version of that software, each with their own data, but they're using the same software. With S/4HANA private cloud, yes, it's the same software, but you've isolated it into your own cloud environment where you can do whatever you want with it. If you want to break it or change it, whatever, you can. And so for better or for worse, you can. And so organizations are doing that because they want the flexibility. And I think the market is speaking pretty loudly to SAP saying, we don't want public cloud. We want private cloud, or we want on-prem. So, SAP is caught between a rock and a hard place because they make a lot more profit on their public cloud, and they're not really going to get the full ROI or fully optimize or maximize their results on S/4HANA until they get more and more customers to move to public cloud. So I think you've got a conflict of interest here, conflict of priorities. SAP's priorities are a lot different than what most customers are wanting.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm sure it's something that we will continue to talk about on this podcast. I know it's been a topic in the past, and we'll just have to keep watching it as the deadline keeps getting closer and closer.
Yeah. And don't worry, I will keep talking about it. Even if you don't ask me about it, I'm still going to talk about it because it really irritates me.
Yes, absolutely. But I want to go back to AI now, get back into all the different things about AI we're going to talk about today. But this first one, the newsworthy topic, is something that really caught my attention. And it's according to 2025, the AI priorities study, 53% of IT leaders believe AI will lead to workforce reductions in their organizations. Now, that at first can maybe sound alarming to people and something that obviously people are worried about. But what's interesting is how divided the industry is on this. Some leaders see AI as a way to cut costs for sure, but others are framing it as a tool to amplify human potential, to free people away from the repetitive work so they can focus on creativity, strategy, and innovation. A few things stood out to me in this article, and that is many see AI as a productivity enhancer, not necessarily a job killer. Some roles like software QA may shift or evolve with AI support, but that's happened before with other tech revolutions we've seen in the past. And CIOs are being encouraged to reskill and empower their teams instead of just reducing headcount. So instead of asking, is AI replacing us, maybe the better question is, how can we grow with it? Eric, I have a few questions for you on this. I know we can maybe dive into it in different ways later today in our conversation, but first of all, how should CIOs be thinking about AI? Is it more of a cost-cutting tool or a growth opportunity?
I think it's more of a growth opportunity, honestly. I mean, and there might be some cases where it could lead to cost cutting if you're super inefficient. But I think in most cases, what it does is it just gives you an opportunity to rethink how people's jobs are designed. What are their roles and responsibilities? What's their focus? And I think your focus just changes and your mix of work changes when you've got these AI and agentic AI tools embedded within the organization. And I think it also is more likely to create opportunities to do things that aren't getting done by anyone or anything right now. You think of all the ways that, you could be using generative AI to create better data, better CAD drawings, or whatever it is. I mean, there's so many things that you could be using AI for to do things that you're either not doing at all because you don't have the time in your job, or you're not doing it well because you don't have the time, or you just don't have the skill set. So I think more than anything, it creates an opportunity to rethink people's jobs. But the key is you can't just put these tools in place and say it's going to change people's jobs. It's going to make them more efficient. It's going to make them better. You can't just put it in place and assume that that's going to happen, because it won't happen. You need to, I mean, the tool itself might still work. You could still have all these agentic AI bots or whatever out there doing their thing, but you can't expect that people now, the employees you have, are just somehow going to be more productive or somehow going to do their jobs better. You have to define it for them. I mean, you have to, or even if you want to collaborate with them to redefine their job, you have to do that to give them clarity and direction on what their processes and what their jobs are going to look like in this world of AI coexisting with our day-to-day work.
Yeah, absolutely. And with that, I know you kind of just touched on this, but what would you say to somebody that's scared that they're going to lose their job to AI, or just that their job is going to be completely invalid? And what skills do you think they should work on developing in the next few years?
Yeah, well, that's a good question. So first of all, I'd back up. If you look at the big picture, most people listening to this podcast are probably white collar type people that are more likely to be impacted in some way by AI, more directly impacted by AI. Most of the world is not white collar. I mean, I don't know what the percentages are, but I'm guessing, if you look at the world as a whole, all 8 billion people, I'm guessing maybe there's, 10 or 20% of those people are office workers or white collar people. I mean, an overwhelming majority of the world is doing work that can't necessarily be replaced by AI. It could be augmented by AI, but it's not going to replace, for example, the people out on a shop floor that are running the equipment to put together cars or to, work on sub-assemblies on a factory floor. AI might provide better tools. It might provide better information now to where you can do your job better. But again, you need to train those people on how to use those tools to do their jobs better. But you're not going to replace the average shop floor worker. Even robots, you look at, people were worried in the 80s, 90s, and now into the 2000s and 2020s, people have been and still are in some ways worried about robotics replacing their jobs. And what we saw is it didn't really replace jobs as much as we thought, because you would think robotics more than anything would be a bigger threat to blue collar workers. If you can replace the factory floor worker with a robot, that's a real threat. But what we saw instead is now it just changed people to where now they are doing less manual labor with their hands. And now they're more skilled labor where they're working with machines, and they're doing more because now they have machines to increase their productivity. So anyways, I think it's, you're talking about a pretty small subset that are really going to be potentially directly impacted or threatened by AI. So I'd say majority of the world doesn't have to worry about it. But for that 10 to 20% or whatever the number is, those white collar workers, people working with computers and information in an office, it's even there. It's like, yeah, AI could theoretically get rid of some jobs, but it's probably just going to give you a chance to do more work. And it's just going to allow humans to scale themselves better.
Yeah. And to go off of this question as well, where do you see the biggest opportunities for human and AI collaboration in enterprise environments?
Oh man. I think it's going to be in the highly complex data collection and analysis types of tasks. I mean, you think about, I've grown up in the consulting technology space, particularly within manufacturing. Most early in my career, all I really did was manufacturing type stuff. And I still, we as a company at Third Stage still do a lot of manufacturing type of consulting in the tech space. But when I think about manufacturing and some of the ways it can be used, one of the biggest challenges in manufacturing has always been MRP. And for those that don't know manufacturing, MRP is material resource planning. And what MRP does is it's a way to say, here's what we think demand's going to be for our product, which means we have to back into how we're going to produce that, all that stuff. And it traces all the way back to buying the raw materials, getting the raw materials into your warehouse, actually building and producing whatever the product is, and then getting it to the customer in time. So MRP, material resource planning, is this really complicated, cumbersome task that involves tons and tons of data. It's highly inaccurate. It's subject to lots of different variations, lots of different variables. And that's something where I feel like AI could finally maybe solve that problem, because the ERP systems have been around for decades now trying to solve that problem. And yes, it's made it easier and a little bit better, but it hasn't really solved the problem. I mean, companies still have a lot of the same problems now with modern technology as they did 25 plus years ago when I first started with less modern technology. So I think AI, though, could be a real game changer with anything that has to do with a lot of gathering a lot of information and collecting it and analyzing it in a short period of time.
Yeah, absolutely. And combining AI with robots is that might lead to more things too. And I guess we'll find out from this conversation with Chad. I'm sure we'll be able to get some answers from him as well on what that future looks like.
Yeah, we're going to talk about robotics. We'll get into AI as well. We'll get into Industry 4.0 and smart manufacturing and just how robots are being used to enable better manufacturing. So, and even if by the way, even if you're not in manufacturing, you really want to hear this interview, because we're not just going to talk about manufacturing, first of all, but second of all, we're going to talk about real use cases outside of manufacturing as well. So I already know from him being a client of ours, I already know a lot of how they're using these robots in non-manufacturing environments. But I am going to ask quite a few questions about manufacturing as well. It's super interesting. You want to stick around for that. And then later, after the interview with Chad here in a minute, in a few minutes, we'll get into the topic of agentic AI and whether or not it's going to replace human jobs and human decision-making. So be sure to stick around. We're going to cover all this and more in the remainder of this episode. And we're going to take a quick break right now. We'll be back with more Transformation Ground Control.
If you are involved in any sort of digital transformation or business change initiative, you'll want to download the Digital Transformation Report. With its comprehensive overview of business and technology trends and best practices, this report is a must-have guide for any transformation project or executive team. Download this free report by visiting Third Stage Consulting at thirdstage-consulting.com. You can also visit our website to learn more about us or download independent reports, videos, and other best practices. Again, visit thirdstage-consulting.com today to learn how you can take your transformation to the third stage of success.
Are you looking for ways to promote your product or service to enterprise technology decision makers and influencers throughout the world, like the ones who listen to this podcast? Major Tom Productions creates media, events, and influencer marketing for B2B technology providers. Our productions are exciting, educational, disruptive, and effective. Most importantly, they create results. Our content is unlike any other in this industry, engaging, influential, and trusted by technology buyers and influencers throughout the world. Each month, our productions reach hundreds of thousands of targeted buyers and decision makers who trust and engage with our honest and tech-agnostic content. With long-tail viral results and engagement with our content, Major Tom Productions provides a way to reach your target market and create awareness, calls to action, and a connection with potential customers. So collaborate with us today. Learn how we can feature your product or service on podcasts such as Transformation Ground Control, Journey to S/4HANA, and Journey to Dynamics 365. We can also feature your brand on our YouTube channel called Digital Transformation with Eric Kimberling, which boasts over 100,000 subscribers and over 2 million video views per year. You can also participate in our in-person events, including our Digital Stratosphere Conference. Contact us today to learn more. We can tailor a marketing campaign that works for you. We look forward to helping more people learn more about and become engaged with your brand.
Hello, welcome back to Transformation Ground Control, episode number 215. My name is Kimberling here at Darian Chwialkowski. You can find new episodes of the show every Wednesday by going to transformationgroundcontrol.com. And of course, this is the podcast that covers everything related to digital transformation. It's a tech agnostic view of the strategy, people, process, and technology aspects of digital transformation. So thanks for being here today. I'm excited for our next guest. Chad Wright is the CIO of a company called Boston Dynamics. And I've actually known Chad for a long time. He's a former client of mine back from his previous employer. And he recently has hired Third Stage to help with their own ERP and digital transformation journey. But that's not what we're going to talk about here, Chad. I actually wanted him on the show for this discussion to talk about their products that they're producing for different manufacturers and supply chain related organizations. And they create robots. They create software to go along with the robots. And they also have an AI not a division, but a sister company that does AI stuff that integrates with the robots. So we're going to talk about all things robotics and how it's fitting into manufacturing and supply chain management. Excited to have Chad on the show. And with all that being said, Chad, thanks for being here today.
Thank you, Eric. My pleasure. Really excited to be here to speak with you.
Yeah, and hopefully you're not too worn down from the technical issues that I was having, but I appreciate you being here today. Before we jump in here, just with some of the questions I've got for you, tell us a little bit about yourself and sort of your journey. You and I have known each other for years now, even before your current role. But just tell us maybe a little bit about your background, and then we'll get into a little bit more about Boston Dynamics as well.
Yeah, my background is primarily in business systems analysis, project management. Sort of grew up on that side of the IT fence, if you will, and learned infrastructure management, cybersecurity, service desk operations a little bit later on in my career. And for the past 11 years, I've been working in the robotics industry. Prior to Boston Dynamics, I was at Amazon Robotics for 6 years, running traditional IT for a highly scalable robotics solution that's used in the Amazon fulfillment centers today, and brought you things like Prime and same-day delivery because of the automation behind the scenes. And then joined Boston Dynamics a little more than 5 years ago at an inflection point when the company was transitioning from a research and development organization to a commercial business, launching our first iconic robot, if you will, Spot, our yellow dog quadruped robot. And been here ever since. Did a full digital transformation, walking in the door where we had really no systems, no processes, no people. Joined at about 200 people and about 950 strong today. And just been an amazing ride with all sorts of problem solving. And again, going through troubleshooting on a desktop is no big deal for me. It's part of our life every day in IT.
It's not a big deal for you, but it apparently is a big deal for me,
Right.
Based on how long it took me to figure out what the issue was. What got you into robotics? Just out of curiosity, did you set out to pursue this industry early on, or how did you marry IT with robotics?
Yeah, I actually got in by accident. I was really looking at the opportunity at Amazon Robotics. Came at a time when I was looking to make a change. I actually came out of healthcare, automated physician billing, medical billing, physician, patient records and things. So it came out of a completely different industry. I was looking at it from a pure IT perspective, getting an opportunity to manage an entire IT organization as opposed to just enterprise applications where I had done a lot of my background. And so it was an opportunity to sort of grow my skills and my responsibilities sort of horizontally from an IT perspective, and just sort of fell in love with the industry. And then when Boston Dynamics came along, I actually wasn't expecting to stay in robotics. I was looking to do something different. And when the job came, again, it was an opportunity to be the company's first CIO, and just said, this is something I had to go for and give it a shot. And I've been super happy that I did.
Yeah. Sounds like a super fun journey in a super cool, innovative area to be in, not just in IT, but within the robotics industry is even cooler.
That's right.
So tell us a little bit more about Boston Dynamics. You started to talk about Spot and some of the other robots, but tell us, maybe just backing up a little bit even more than that. Just tell us what's the purpose of the company, and what do you guys what are you developing these robots for? And
Right.
just a little bit of
Right.
backstory if you don't
Yeah,
mind.
but I mean, Boston Dynamics is building robots that are changing the world, right? They move, they perceive, and they move around the world and manipulate the world in ways never been seen before. The company's been around since 1992. It was founded by a gentleman by the name of Mark Rabert. He came out of the leg lab at MIT, and he was studying leg motion of animals and humans, which is why our robots are predominantly legged robots, whether they're 4 legs or 2 legs. And for the first 25 some odd years of its existence, it was building research and development projects through DARPA. And they'd build one robot to solve a particular problem, a robot that needed to walk a certain distance without any assistance, or run at a speed, or climb the outside of a building, right? All these really interesting problems that they were solving. And that technology sort of manifested itself in our 3 robots today, which we'll talk about a little bit later. But all of that research has gone into our robots in the way that they are working in the world. And that's a significant advantage for us, I think, right? All of that research has really proven itself valuable in how we're able to perceive and move around and manipulate the world. And so we have an interesting history. The company was actually purchased by Google back in 2014. So from 14 to 18, we're owned by Google. That obviously made some cultural imprints on who we are today. Was sold to SoftBank in 2018. But during that time, the company, started to think about how could we take all that interesting research and technology and build a product. And that's where Spot came from. That robot was released at the very end of 2019. And that was that inflection point of the company. And then in 2021, we were purchased by Hyundai Motor Group. And that's been an excellent collaboration, understanding how our robots can help in the automotive manufacturing industry, as well as using their expertise to help us scale and improve our process.
Yeah, that's very cool, and really cool stuff you guys are doing. And it is interesting how I imagine both Google and Hyundai have had interesting cultural impacts on you.
Right.
I'm going to come back to Spot here in a second, but just to give people a flavor for some of the innovative stuff you guys are doing, I wanted to play a very short YouTube video that's on your YouTube channel, on Boston Dynamics YouTube channel. And if you don't subscribe to the channel, I highly recommend you do. It's super cool. In fact, I hate to admit it, I wasn't subscribing to the YouTube channel until I was prepping for this interview, and I started watching all these videos, and I had trouble picking one to show. But I thought this one was super cool because it's so different. And let me just show the video here. And this is and I'll ask you a quick question about what this is, but I just want to give a visual of something that you guys are working on right now. So hang tight 1 second. I'll play this video for you. It's a little less than 1 minute, so it'll go quick here. So super cool stuff there. And I assume, before I ask you some follow-up questions here, I assume that you were the one that taught it how to do the breakdancing and the cartwheel and everything.
I can tell you that I was not the person wearing the motion capture suit that they used to build that routine. No, there is another engineer who has the lucky job of wearing the motion capture suit when they first build the simulations to do that.
Gotcha. I mean, when I first saw that, I thought there's no way that's a real robot, but it looks like someone wearing a bodysuit or something.
I see faces. I see, humans and animals and dogs and things in our robots, and just being around them so much. And they're designed in a way to be sort of more empathetic to us, right? They're going to be part of our lives and so forth. So you really start to build those connections. I love the comments, right? I think that video received 4 million hits in its first day when it dropped last week. And I love the comments. There was someone just pontificating in the first, second, or third comment saying how that they knew it was CGI. And if you actually watch that video very carefully, there's a point where I think doing the breakdancing where there's a piece of plastic that breaks off the foot and flies into the background. I mean, it's not CGI, like it's real. These robots really move. But what you saw there was the benefit of our research with the Robotics AI Institute, which is our sister company spun out by Hyundai 5 years ago. And it's all the reinforcement learning and the machine learning that's used to really smooth out those movements in a way that we've never seen before.
Yeah, that's super cool. Now, what is that? Tell us a little bit about that humanoid robot.
Yeah.
It's a super cool, great
Yeah.
video. But what kind of use case do you guys think or envision
that?
For?
So that robot there is Atlas. That's our humanoid robot. It's actually the electric version of Atlas. Atlas has been around for well over 10 years. It was a hydraulic version before that. The hydraulic version obviously was not anything that was going to be sold in any way, because it ran on heated, high pressurized hydraulic fluid, right, which was not very safe for the people around it. So about a year ago, we created this new version of Atlas, and the humanoid becomes sort of that pinnacle of robotics. It's designed to be the most flexible robot that you have available. Imagine training it on a variety of different use cases. These robots will be working in Hyundai's plant, in their manufacturing plants this year. And you can imagine it performing tasks that people are doing today. There's another great video out on the YouTube channel as well, where Atlas is moving engine covers, and they're doing a sorting job where they take the different engine covers and they move them from one case into another case that gets put right out onto the manufacturing line, so that the cases are put in the right order when there's a Tucson or a Santa Fe or an Elantra that comes down the line. It's grabbing the right parts at the right time. That is a job that is performed by a human today. Very, very monotonous, very boring type of work, but something that Atlas can excel at.
That's super cool. Curious to hear from the audience too. Just if you don't mind dropping the chat as we're talking here, how you could envision that humanoid robot being used in a manufacturing environment. I'd love to hear just ideas or hypothetical scenarios that the audience has in mind. But if we back up a little bit here and just talk about just robotics and what you guys are doing to change the world, to use your words and kind of your vision for the company, or not your vision, but the company's vision for where you're headed. How do you see robotics sort of affecting and impacting the world of manufacturing in general here in the coming years?
Well, I think at the end of the day, it comes down to exploring the use of robotics to solve problems, right? And so what's the problem we're trying to solve? It's around labor, quite honestly, right? These robots are doing work in the world around us. We have 3 robots that we sell 2 of them today. That's Spot, that's the quadruped robot. And then we have another robot called Stretch that's used in logistics and moving boxes. And then of course, Atlas, which is still in R&D, and that's slowly being moved into production work later this year. But we see Spot used by hundreds of manufacturing customers today for things like inspections. So imagine there's jobs today that people are performing. They're inspecting pipelines. They're inspecting working equipment. They're inspecting, and looking for noises, vibrations, air leaks, gas leaks, heat anomalies. And take Spot and use it as a mobile IoT sensor. Put your favorite device on its back. It could be a point-to-zoom camera that's going to look at the gauges on the wall and detect whether the needle should be in one zone and it's in a different zone. It has a fluke and it's looking at noise and vibrations, or it's looking at heat anomalies. And the robot captures that data and triggers back to your ERP system, your asset management system, and triggers a work order to a human to go out and detect something that's about to fail, right? So we see the ROI in our robots is not about replacing human labor. It's really about the predictive maintenance and preventing the downtime. The human piece of it is a very, very small part of that ROI calculation, because at the end of the day, you can't afford to have your production line down for any period of time. And that's where we see the real big push for the use of robotics in that whole industrial inspection area.
Yeah. Yeah, and I was just at your facility a few weeks ago with others on our team as we were um, doing some workshops with your team, and I got to see. I didn't get to see the humanoid in action like in that video, but I did see Spot.
Yeah.
That area in the back where you showed me all the different spots running around doing stuff, and you had pointed out how there's a bunch of cameras that's constantly capturing information about the environment. Tell us about that. Like, so it may be using it in the context of that use case around predictive maintenance and reading
Sure.
a gauge or spotting a visual problem with something. How do
Sure.
the cameras and AI all factor into that?
Yeah, so I mean, the Spot robot, to give people a sense, is about the robot itself is about 75 pounds and has a payload capacity of carrying about another 35 pounds. So all in all, it's about 100 pounds. It's not terribly large. I have a black lab at home, a 7-year-old black lab dog. He's just about the same size, about 85 pounds, just about the same size. And that robot has 5 cameras on it, right? It's got sort of 2 in the front of, like, let's say its face, and it gives it about 180-degree view. It's got 1 on each side, 1 in the back. So the robot is constantly looking at the world 360 degrees around itself and constantly building a point cloud and looking at what might be around it, and gives it the ability to move. And it's been trained with a number of, rules and algorithms, if you will, for how to move and how to detect something, whether you step over it or step around it. As a legged robot, it has significant advantages in your factory or in your manufacturing floor because it can go upstairs and go up and down stairs. It can step over threshold. It can step over objects, although it tends to move around objects that are on the floor. It doesn't need to know exactly where it needs to go. You just tell it sort of like A to B, and it'll figure out how to get there. And so that's why these robots can be very good in an industrial setting like that, because the environment is not always predictable. We have an idea of what the factory is going to look like. We have an idea of what it's going to be, how it's going to be laid out, but there's movement of people, there's movement of equipment. And so the robot needs to be able to navigate it. And that's where those cameras come in, and the sort of the AI aspect of sort of perceiving the world around it and then moving and manipulating within it.
Yeah, that's super cool. Here's a comment that's sort of related to that here from Gary. I'm sorry. I believe it's Gary on LinkedIn. It's sad that there's so much focus on robots taking jobs. I think using robots for automation and manufacturing is one of the greatest opportunities for humanity. Is that how you guys view it too? I mean, it sounds like you're not really looking at this as a replacement for humans, but more of an augmentation.
Yeah, and it really is. I think that's a great question or a great comment. It's one that I hear all the time. Having worked at Amazon and for 6 years, and now Boston Dynamics for another 5, everywhere where I go, I get that question or that comment, right? And so there are some people that are just absolutely afraid, right? They see a robot and they think the Terminator. Our chief strategy officer, Mark Tierman, has a great comment to that. When he first joined the company, he was watching and posting on LinkedIn, and someone said, "Oh, Mark, you're going to go there and build Terminators." And he said, "Actually, no, we're building C-3POs." Right. So for the science fiction fans in the world, you know who C-3PO is, right? C-3PO is an assistant. It's a co-working robot. And that's where we see it is. I mean, there's genuine problems that we're going to have in the logistics space, in automotive, in warehouse and manufacturing. We have this labor shortage that's looming. And as our population ages and retires and gets out of the workforce, there's going to be a lot of tribal knowledge that goes with these people, in addition to their ability to move the physical world around us, whether it's objects on a production line or boxes in your supply chain. That's a real problem. And the companies that have the foresight and the advanced thinking to be investing in these areas are going to be the ones that come out winners.
Yeah, absolutely. That makes a lot of sense. It's sort of like, people that are afraid of AI, a lot of time, there's a lot of fear around AI replacing jobs, but I tend to see it as something that's just going to make us all better at our jobs if we embrace it.
Agreed.
So that's very interesting. So here's a comment from Will on LinkedIn. Will says, "Greetings from Naperville, Illinois. It's remarkable to witness the rapid advancement of robotics in recent years. Having attended ProMat last week, I was thoroughly impressed by the extensive presence of companies in this field. Just 15 years ago, few of these vendors were actively targeting distribution and logistics firms, underscoring the significant evolution in this space." So great point there. And another comment here from Norberto on YouTube. "How amazing. I can see how this reduces the risk of adoption." And there's a follow-up to that too, and cuts down the cost of revamping a line. And that's sort of like related to that use case you were just talking about with Spot.
Yeah, that's a great observation there with cutting down the cost of revamping a line. There's a case study on our website. There's a semiconductor, small semiconductor company here in New England that was faced with the challenge of revamping their entire production space with sensors. Right, they had legacy equipment. They were looking to invest in IoT to help monitor and maintain their production line. And it was, I don't know what it was 7-8 figure investment they were looking at for doing something like that. And so we worked with one of our partners to go in there and show them how to use Spot with their IoT sensors on its back. So instead of investing millions of dollars in putting sensors all over your plant, they put them on Spot's back and then built a series of rounds for Spot to do around that building. And the ROI was off the charts and allowed them to, still solve that problem around preventive maintenance and improve the, the quality and throughput without having to, tear apart the physical space and make these investments.
Yeah, absolutely. You sort of related to that. Here's another comment here from Gary. There are things that we would not want humans to do that robots are ideal for. Consider trying to colonize Mars. I think sending an army of robot workers to Mars would be the only realistic first step to build the initial infrastructure needed to safely support human life. That's super interesting.
It is, and it's a great comment. We describe it as dirty, dull, and dangerous. Right, the jobs that our robots excel at are the jobs that are dirty, dull, and dangerous. Our robots are working on multiple nuclear sites around the world right now. Chernobyl, right, is probably maybe one of the more popular ones. The robot is there because it's doing work in spaces that are just too dangerous for humans. And we've unblocked multiple problems that teams were having on the ground in these spaces because they couldn't get into the back room of the plant because there was a door there. And Spot shows up on the first day and walks to the back of the plant, opens the door, and lets the other robots go through that were trying to do work. Right? They didn't have the arm and the ability to open doors. I mean, it was just it's amazing, and you can't help but be proud to see how the robots are put in places where they're actually protecting humans and still getting this work done.
Yeah. Another example or interesting story you told me when I was there a few weeks ago at your facility in Boston is there's a older version of Spot that's in you guys have this little it's not a museum. It's a museum. Okay. I was gonna say it's like a museum. But it is. So it's all these old versions of the different robots and how they've evolved over the years. And you have this one version of Spot and it said Boston PD on it. And then it had like 2 or 3 bullet holes in it. Yeah. And there's a story behind that. And because I saw that and I thought, what's with the bullet holes?
Yeah. So this was Roscoe, was a Spot robot that was adopted by the Massachusetts State Police. And there was a situation last year where an armed individual barricaded himself in a house. The call went into the police that there were people involved and it was a hostage situation. And so SWAT team came on board. They brought Spot with them. Spot entered the home. All those cameras that you talked about were able to very quickly identify what was going on inside the home, realize that there were no other people there. This person was barricaded themselves. And so Spot, they attempted to just walked around the house, followed the gentleman who kept going from room to room. And I guess the person got a little tired of Spot following him. So he shot it. Actually shot it 2 times. Spot got up both times. Got hit in the arm, got hit in the leg, got hit in the sort of the torso, if you will. Shot it a 3rd time. Didn't get back up after that. But when they told the story to all of us here at Boston Dynamics, it was pretty amazing to see the pride in the engineers' work that they just said, look, we saved people today, right? That could have been a person going into that space and getting shot and killed. So it's pretty amazing the use cases that people are using. Public safety tends to be a big one. Putting it into there was a parking garage that had collapsed in New York last year, the year before, and putting Spot into these dangerous situations. Mining is another one. Construction sites, like all of those are very important. Use cases in areas where we find Spot really contributing.
Yeah, and you talked about how the robots you guys develop have legs, whether it's 2 legs, 4 legs, and they also have faces. And the reason I bring this up is because on one hand, I agree with the previous question, and obviously you're sort of validating that these robots can be used to protect human lives. But there's something that's sort of like a humanization of these robots that almost makes you feel bad for Spot getting shot, even though it's a robot. It's still like, oh, poor Spot, he got shot twice by an armed dude in a house. But what is it? You were talking a little bit when I was there for a few minutes. You told me a little bit about how you have people on your team that focus on what the face should look like and how to, what does it, interact better with humans or create a more emotional bond with humans? Or
we have a team that focuses on human robotic interaction, and that's everything from the color to the texture to what does the face look like, and there's an extraordinary amount of thought that goes into that, because at the end of the day, these robots are going to be around humans, and we're going to see them every day. And how do we react to them? You mentioned when you were here on site, you saw Spot walking around, right? We give Spot missions, and it just walks around the building doing these. They're fake missions, but they're doing things because not only are we just testing Spot's ability to go read a gauge over on this hall and go read another gauge in that hall. It's really about how does the robot interact with the human. And so as we've been learning more and more from our customers, we're adding more and more features and enhancements to the robots, like shining a colored light. Like a green light means that it's moving and it's safe. A white light means that it's doing work, it's stopping and it's taking a reading or a register. Red light might mean take warning, don't go near it. And should it have a sound? Should it have a face? Should it have eyes? All of those things are really, really important. That human robotics interaction team takes that very, very seriously, and how we go about creating that image or likeness that you're going to interact with.
Yeah, that's super cool, and it I imagine it also has a way of making it feel a little less threatening. That if it has that sort of human and emotional response that you're talking about, you could see.
I'll give you a great example of that. We had Spot we were at our ERP vendors conference a couple of years ago, and we brought Spot with us, which is always a great party hit, right? And we had Spot at the cocktail hour at the end of the day, and walking around, and we let people drive it. Like, people are always blown away at that. We said, give them the control and said, go ahead and drive it, try it out. And there was a gentleman that was at the conference, and he had his son with him. It's maybe a 3 or 4 year old boy. And, he did the typical holding his dad's leg, peeking around, wasn't quite sure what to think of it. And, we kind of stopped the robot in front of him to see what he would do. And the father said, hey, it's a dog. It's a dog. It's a doggy. Go see the doggy. And the little boy walked right over, and it's like he looked at it a little, and he put his hand on it like you would pet a dog.
Right.
And for us, in IT, we think about that all the time. It's user interface, it's, user experience. And once he sort of start to think about it as a dog and not a robot, it was like game over. The kid was in love, right? And he had that relationship with it. And so that's, interesting. We see robots here, robots get driven around on, they put on a cart, because maybe they're taken to another part of the building to be fixed, or they're on a stretcher. All right, we have stretchers for the humanoids, and you see them and you feel empathy. You feel, oh no, the robot, fell down and got hurt, or something's wrong. And it's just a really interesting interactions that we tend to have with these machines.
Yeah, I know when I saw him walking around, there was an urge for me. I wanted to pet it.
Yeah.
But if I caught myself, obviously, I was like,
right.
robot, I'm not gonna. But there was that sort of subconscious or just knee-jerk reaction I had to it as well. So I think it's very interesting. Here's an interesting comment from Cecilia on LinkedIn. Cecilia says, I find it incredible and fascinating, not just performance control that are humanly impossible, like real-time predictor analysis before a line fails, but also for rescue missions or highly dangerous tasks. So you can see, you think about really dangerous jobs like coal mining or oil rigs or whatever, so many different use cases where you can think how many lives or injuries and safety violations or safety issues could you address by relying more on robots like these?
It's a great question. We have, very much a culture of data and analytics, and we track things. I can't say we track, lives saved or lives impacted, but, we track things like miles walked, missions performed. And I think our Spots walked over 90,000 miles last year,
Wow.
performing, millions and millions of missions. And that gives us a great deal of data to improve. And you talk about AI and machine learning. It gives us a great deal of data to improve how our robots perform over time. And it's really interesting.
So are you guys, speaking of AI, and this is sort of getting into, the whole industry 4.0 and Internet of Things movement, but you've got these cameras, you've got these sensors on these different robots. And if they're on a manufacturing shop floor and a distribution center, what kind of data are all these robots collecting, and what are you guys doing with the data, and how does it feed into AI?
Yeah. So we deal with data the way that our customers want us to deal with data. We don't have direct access to the robots in the field. We allow our customers to opt in. So they can opt into a program where they share us some anomalized and sort of cut down data. We look at falls, we look at steps, just some very basic information. But for a customer that's using this, they're taking images, they're taking readings, they're taking video. So all of that data is managed locally, right, within their environment. We have a software as a service product called Orbit that we launched last year that is a fleet management software. So imagine that you have dozens of these robots working in your plants all over the world, and that can be centrally controlled and centrally located wherever you want, through our Orbit cloud. And you can see what the robot sees in real time. You can manage notifications and messages and integrate that back to your ERP and asset management systems. It really is gives the flexibility for parts of the world like in Europe where you've got data privacy and things. We do face blurring on the video, and that's for all the robots, even our Stretch robot, which we haven't talked about yet. Stretch it's a big base with an arm, and it moves boxes in the back of a truck. That video could still look at your plant, and so the people that are there. And so we do face blurring and other things to try to maintain privacy for our customers. So that data is a big deal, right? And we continue to evolve our policies around that.
Yeah, that's super cool. And the SaaS model that you guys have started to adapt, and the just the ability to be able to track all this information and add additional value beyond the robot itself. I think that's super fascinating.
Robots create an extraordinary amount of data. I mean, it's amazing how much data they collect. And for me as a CIO, that's a huge part of our strategy. Hybrid cloud technology and supporting, the performance of these robots and the data that's created. It's a lot for sure.
Yeah. Now here's a comment from Saeed on LinkedIn. Saeed says, focusing on the why behind automation is key. It's not just about replacing human labor. It's about creating a more efficient, safer, and more innovative manufacturing environment that ultimately benefits everyone through better products, lower costs, and improved working conditions. It's pretty well said. What are your thoughts on that comment?
Well, I think about it as the flywheel, right? So if you think about, what are the things that impact each other in that sort of cyclic manner, right? So the idea of that flywheel would be, you have robots that create value, right? They're doing things to increase productivity. They're doing things to increase value to your customers. And when that happens, your customers are going to improve or they're going to like your products better. And they're going to, they're going to have a better experience. They're going to talk to their friends, and they're going to gain more customers, right? So again, I've invested in my robots. They're increasing my productivity. That's making my customers happy. They're going to talk to more people, and I'm going to get more customers. I'm going to increase my revenues as a result of that. And I'm going to take those revenues, invest them into new jobs and new robots and new robot features. And you complete that flywheel, right? So, and this was something that Amazon was extraordinarily good at. And we're starting to do it now with our customers, where we've had enough time for our robots to be used in the field to do this. Ty Brady, he's the CTO at Amazon Robotics. He was my peer there for a number of years. He just came on record last year to say how that in Amazon, in the 10 years, in and around the time that I was there, we grew from building 1,500 robots a year to 100,000 a year. They've deployed over 750,000 mobile robots in their fulfillment centers. And in that 10-year period, they created over 1 million jobs.
Wow.
And of those 1 million jobs, there were 700 different job codes.
Wow.
Right. So you start to hear this term robot wrangler, right? We use it here, and I was kind of chuckling about it first. But if you go out to any of your job sites today and you search for robot wrangler, you're going to get a bunch of jobs out there. People and organizations are starting to think about it. There's almost 500 universities in North America that have robotics programs. And that's about building the robots. But what about using the robots? I drove by a community college up in White Mountains in New Hampshire. Come join our robot wrangler program. I had to pull over and almost, I was like, wow, like this is amazing. That companies are looking for talent. Organizations are training. Like we need to think about reskilling and upskilling. And that is all going to help make that flywheel spin even faster.
I'm here with Chad Wright from Boston Dynamics. We're talking about robotics in the world of manufacturing and supply chain management. We've got a lot more to cover, but we'll take a quick break first. We'll be back with more Transformation Ground Control.
My name is Eric Kimberling, and I'm the CEO and founder of Third Stage Consulting. Before we dive too far into today's content, I want to invite you to learn a little bit more about Third Stage Consulting, who we are and what we do. I've included a link to a video right here that describes Third Stage in a bit more detail. It talks about our story, our history, our philosophy, our clients, our service offerings, and that sort of thing. But in general, what Third Stage Consulting does is we're an independent and tech-agnostic consulting provider. We help clients through their entire digital transformation life cycles, beginning with digital strategy, software evaluation and selection, all the way through and including implementation planning, implementation readiness, and the actual implementation itself. We're technology agnostic, so we only represent our clients' best interests. We do not represent software vendors. But having said that, we work very closely with software vendors, all the leading players that you can imagine we've worked with, both in helping clients evaluate and select them, but also in helping clients implement those solutions as well. So we have a very broad, objective, agnostic view of the market that is meant to really represent your interest as you go through your digital transformation. I also encourage you to scan this QR code right here to get access to our resource center. This resource center has a ton of information, ton of ebooks that are free. You have access to top 10 software rankings, playbooks for how to make your project more successful, guides to change management, YouTube videos, all kinds of stuff that are going to help you through your digital transformation. So I encourage you to scan this QR code to get access to those resources. And please feel free to reach out to me directly to brainstorm ideas about your project. Even if it's just informally, you want to bounce around some ideas and get some informal advice, I'd be happy to spend some time with you. So feel free to reach out to me. I've included my contact information below. You can also find it in the description field of this video as well.
The last thing you want to have happen is for your digital transformation to end up in court. I've been doing this for 20 years and I have seen everything. My name is Marcus Harris. I'm a software and technology attorney focusing my practice on drafting and negotiating software-related contracts and litigating software disputes across the country. Feel free to reach out to us at taftlaw.com. We'd love to talk to you about the litigation process and what you can expect.
Hello, welcome back to Transformation Ground Control, episode number 215. My name is Eric Kimberling, here with Darian Chwialkowski. You can find new episodes of this show every Wednesday at transformationgroundcontrol.com. I'm here with Chad Wright from Boston Dynamics, and we're talking about robotics in the world of manufacturing and supply chain management. You mentioned Amazon, and you talked a little bit about how you originally came from Amazon before joining Boston Dynamics. But that's where you and I first met. Is you were CIO at a company called Kiva Systems, which was then acquired by Amazon, which then was branded as Amazon Robotics.
That's right.
How are the robots that you guys made at Kiva/Amazon Robotics? How are those robots different from what you guys are doing at Boston Dynamics?
Well, most fundamentally speaking, from a non-roboticist, it's really about how they move. The Kiva Systems robots, now the Amazon Robotics robots, for the most part, they move by reading a QR code on the floor. So think of a large sheet of graph paper with this meticulously created grid on the floor with QR codes, and the robot reads those QR codes on the bottom, basically moves in 90-degree straight lines and 90-degree turns throughout 1 million square feet of area. And those robots, there's a control system that will determine if two robots are attempting to go to the same square. There's some movement capabilities and some rules that will dictate that. And then the Boston Dynamics robots are completely autonomous, right? They're just observing what's around it. And if it sees a conflict, it will try to figure out how to resolve that conflict by moving around it, by waiting for an aisle to clear, whatever that might be. But it is interesting, as Amazon, I keep in touch with my friends at Amazon Robotics, and that grid-based, that QR code-based solution is an amazing solution for that problem. And they are, again, supplementing what they do with other robots, arm-based gripping. Right? You have to grab millions and millions of different SKUs. Our robot Stretch grabs boxes, and that's a very, very different problem that you need to solve. But just having been around these engineers for so long, it's so fascinating listening to how they go about trying to attempt these very, sometimes impossible, very, very difficult problems.
Yeah, that's very cool. A comment from Will Quinn on LinkedIn. I won't pop it on the screen just because it's a bit of a longer comment, but I'll read it to you here. Will says, it's wild to think about how distributors were already scrambling to find pickers, packers, and warehouse folks before the pandemic hit. Now with e-commerce going through the roof and warehouses popping up everywhere, it's only gotten crazier. Those labor shortages are worse than ever. Humanoid robots could totally step in there, tackling the grunt work like picking and packing, while also handling the sketchy stuff like lifting heavy loads or working in dicey spots.
Yeah. It's a great comment, Will. It goes to show you, Amazon bought Kiva Systems back in 2012. Imagine the foresight. Yeah. Right, to make that decision. It was one of the best, Amazon will tell you this. Harvard Business School wrote a big case on it. It was one of the best investments that they ever made. It was one of the best acquisitions, right, from a pure M&A perspective, that Amazon had ever done. And I'm so grateful to have been part of that. You talked about humanoids being able to step in and do all of those things. It's very interesting. One of the first things that we talk about with our customers here at Boston Dynamics when we're helping them think about the use of robotics is, what's the right form factor, right? It's easy to say, well, I'll get a humanoid to do it. Well, maybe you don't need a humanoid to do it, right? Maybe you can get by with a different type of robot. Maybe your factory floor is completely flat and smooth, and a wheeled robot would work just fine. It's really about, understanding the form factor and then looking at the robot that makes the most sense. The promise of the humanoid is because of its flexibility, right? And you can train it on one task and have it do another task, right? And you can, start to build and accumulate those repetitive tasks and whatnot, and give the robot now the ability to figure out, how do I solve this problem, right? We're not there yet, but that's the promise of AI as well, is continuing to advance to that level.
Right. Absolutely. Now, what about when you have your customers who are trying to implement these robotics at scale, and coming at this from a CIO perspective, your CIO perspective, what are some of the key infrastructure and integration considerations when a customer of yours is trying to implement robotics at scale?
Yeah, I saw someone ask in the chat as well, do they run on local area networks and whatnot? It's like Wi-Fi and cellular, right? Is usually how we think about it. And as we prep our customers, we talk a lot about what's the problem you're trying to solve? What's the right form factor of a robot that needs to do it? What are the business processes that you're looking to disrupt with this? What are the types of IoT data that you're going to create? Is your infrastructure capable of taking on that volume of data? Where are you going to store it? How are you going to access it? What are you going to do with it? Right? Those are all really, really big challenges. Network is a big deal too. Like I said, the robots generally work on Wi-Fi because they're going to connect back to your area. It's not a requirement. The robots can operate. But if it's going to connect back, which is what you want to do, it's going to connect back to your infrastructure. It's going to be through Wi-Fi or cellular. And I say cellular because we have customers like power companies that have large outdoor spaces. And those power companies, you don't have Wi-Fi necessarily in that physical space, so they're looking at, they're carrying some sort of cellular unit that they can use to communicate. We have robots inspecting pipelines over long distances. I've seen a use case video of a spot that was inspecting a vineyard. Right, so you think like outdoor use cases where cellular can be really, really important. So a lot of different questions that we help. We just launched a Boston Dynamics consulting group in the last 2 weeks, and those are the people that are going to come in and really help, whether you're using our robots or not, really help you put that strategy together and think about those types of questions as you get ready for robots to come on site.
Yeah, that's super cool. You also had talked about, when I was visiting with you a few weeks ago, you talked about how these robots have been tested to withstand some pretty extreme weather and temperature types of situations. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, you're referring to the hyperbaric chamber that we had on our test floor. Yeah, they're certified. I don't know the names of the certifications, but they're certified to a certain certain high temperature and low temperatures, certain amount of water. Certainly, they're not going to walk to the bottom of a lake, but they can withstand rain, wind, sand. We have what we call the Dino Pen here at our facility. That's an outdoor facility, and the robots get a full treatment of year-round New England weather. Right, so it could be 90 to 100 degrees Fahrenheit in the summertime. It could be 20 below Fahrenheit in the wintertime. Lots of rain, lots of sun, lots of dirt. All of these types of things. And the robots are set to do that. And it really, again, depends on our customers. You mentioned oil rigs earlier. We have spot robots working on oil rigs for long periods of time without any human interaction. And the salt water is damaging to a lot of equipment sometimes. And so it's important to us that our robots can be autonomous, and that means that they need to be self-sufficient in those ways.
Yeah. Have you, here's a question from Darian on LinkedIn. Darian says, have you encountered examples where automation actually helped retain human workers by removing high turnover or high risk tasks?
Oh, interesting question. I know that at Amazon, I was there during a time where Amazon was converting their traditional fulfillment centers to the robotic fulfillment centers. So imagine, in a traditional fulfillment centers, what we probably all have experienced one way or the other, where there's a person with a shopping cart walking around, this vast warehouse, picking things off a shelf and putting them in a cart and then doing something with it. I got to work in one of those as part of management training, and I worked in one of those for a week, and I watched some of the most amazing people walking the floors at great speeds and at great accuracy, grabbing things off of shelves and putting orders together and moving things. And I'll tell you, I worked there a week. I was sore. I mean, it was a tough job. People opening boxes, you get a box cutter and you're opening boxes when they come off the truck and prep them. Like, there's so many steps in all of that. And, talking with, some of the workers and some of the leaders, their jobs changed. They weren't walking 10 miles a day on a poured concrete floor anymore. They were standing still and the robots would bring the products to them. And that, I don't know if it's necessarily if I saved someone's, from quitting because of that, but you could definitely see the transformation, the type of work that people were doing because of robotics.
Yeah. How do you think, just kind of looking forward, how do you think robotics will impact manufacturing and supply chain management in general? I mean, if you had to put your crystal ball in place here, what would you predict?
Yeah, I think it's going to continue to be extraordinary impact. It's a matter of, finding the right use cases that can be automated with these robots. And we're already seeing it, in our customers where, Spot is doing inspections and Stretch is moving boxes and Atlas is going to be, performing the job of a material handler in these Hyundai factories. And I think as we continue to learn more about our customers, we feel very good about being able to enhance our robots even further as they need it. So AI is going to speed up that transformation. I don't know where I saw this, and maybe it just came out of a conversation, but I think robotics in general is heading towards its own ChatGPT moment, right? If you think about when you first learned about and saw ChatGPT, generative AI became, dinner table talk in every household in the world. And robotics is heading there, right? There's going to be some use case that shows the world the potential and changes the way that we think about things. And that's definitely on the horizon, right? I don't know what it is, who's going to do it, how it's going to work, but absolutely this convergence of robotics, the technology, the actuators, the ability to move with artificial intelligence and machine learning, and the ability to speed all of this up is really going to build something pretty incredible.
Yeah. I imagine the consumerization of robots will help that. Once consumers start buying robots for their kids or just to have robots around the house, things like that, that's when you've really hit that tipping point of adoption.
Yeah, and look, there's a lot of work to be done there, right? Because working in a home is completely unpredictable, right? Your factory, your work sites are far more predictable than what you would expect at home, and robots need to have that ability to think. What is that? What is that environment? What do I do? And most importantly, is it's got to keep people safe, right? These robots, at the end of the day, they're machines. They have weight. They have momentum. And that it needs to be safe. And that's something that we take very, very seriously in what we do.
What do your customers initially think about robots? Especially, if I back up for a second, we're all used to seeing robots out on shop floors, right? Robots that sort of move things down an assembly line and for the really mundane tasks, the very repetitive tasks. We're used to seeing robots and machinery that's very sophisticated, multi-million-dollar machines, things like that. So that's been around for a while. That whole automation on the shop floor has been happening for quite some time. But when you talk about true robotics and the way you guys are defining it, how do people respond to it? Even the ones that eventually buy the robots. Is there a certain amount of skepticism, uncertainty, excitement? How would you describe or generalize the people's reaction to it?
I think it's all of the above, right? That you've described it, which is one of the reasons why I like to take the robot out whenever I can. As a CIO, I think it's my duty to help educate other IT practitioners that we need to be thinking about robotics the same way we think about ERP systems, right? Change management is absolutely critical, right? This. I listened to you long enough, Eric, to know change management is sort of top of mind in any ERP project. Robotics is no different. And I've asked, some of the field engineers, like, what's it like when you first walk in? Understanding what's the reaction going to be, especially now when someone might look across the aisle and say, "Oh, that robot's going to take my job." And so I said, "So what do you do?" They said, "Well, for the first 2 weeks, they bring Spot to the lunchroom, and they walk the dog into the lunchroom, and people come over, get to know it a little bit, take a picture." Spot is great for selfies. Control the robot, drive it, just start to see what it's like and have a conversation about it and do it. And that's a big part of the change management transformation when we bring robots on site. And I always like to tell that story because I just thought it was such a great use of our talent in a way to share and educate with people before the project even starts. And so, yeah, it's a big way of just trying to educate people and get them comfortable.
Yeah. That's super, super cool and super interesting. I imagine over time that becomes more and more natural, a natural adoption as people, especially even, seeing a video like the one we just showed or talking about use cases like these. I think that people start to open up once they see the possibilities or some of the possibilities that could happen with the robotics.
Absolutely.
So how do you guys, I kind of see, correct me if I'm wrong, I kind of see two different angles that you guys work from. You have you opened up by talking about how you're trying to make the world a better place, essentially, with robotics. And so there's a sort of grand visioning and this grand innovation that you guys pursue, and it almost reminds me a little bit of Steve Jobs. Like, you guys aren't necessarily going to the market and doing market analysis to see what kind of robot you should build. It almost seems like you guys are building something that no one's really thinking about. But then there's the manufacturers that have very tangible, specific use cases that may or may not be sexy, or may or may not be as sexy as that robot doing breakdancing moves that I showed you. So how do you work with and collaborate with manufacturers, some of your customers, to to build better use cases or build a better product here?
Well, the advantage we have right out of the gate is that we're owned by Hyundai Motor Group. So, we look no further than, across the hall to our Hyundai counterparts, and we're leveraging them for scaling our operations. Obviously, they're manufacturing experts, and they have a lot of influence on how we are building our own production environments. And then they're also taking the robots and using them in their factories and providing feedback. So we can do that almost in private, right, before we start talking to our customers per se. But look, we spend a lot of time, often at our expense, going into customer sites before, during, and after projects and just learning. Look, for the first 2 years in 2020 and 2021, when the world was sort of under pandemic control, customers were buying spot, right? And they were trying it out for innovation. We were partnering with all the hospitals here in the Boston area on how to interact with potential COVID patients, right? And keeping our people safe. And so each of those becomes a learning experience. And where, our product management team is amazing. And the amount of time that they spend talking to customers and just going to the sites and visiting the sites and seeing the physical space and looking at how the robots can get involved is a big part of why we see the success and why we're so excited about the future and the work that our robots are going to do.
Yeah, that's very, very cool. Here's a question from Darian on LinkedIn. Darian says, do you believe that as robots evolve, we'll need new kinds of management or leadership roles like robot operations managers or AI workflow designers to coordinate all of this? And maybe to add to that, will it be a human or a robot? If the answer is yes, would it be human or robot that would do this?
Darian, that's an outstanding question. It's interesting. If you talk to Salesforce, they'll tell you, your boss will be, an agent, right? At some point, right? But Vala Afshar is one of my friends. He's the digital chief evangelist at Salesforce. Talks a lot about that. He says you'll have agentic coworkers. You might have an agentic boss. Darian's question is spot on. I like to say, all of these lights out and smart factories that we're going to build still will need smart people to run them. Right? They're going to need people that know how and understand how to manage a robotic fleet, right? The productivity of a single person is grown, to the nth degree based on the number of robots that they control. And that's sort of why our products are evolving this way with that orbit fleet management. So yeah, I think there's going to be different types of management. There's going to be different types of people on the ground working. We have this really cool a concept video that we show what a factory of the future looks like. And it's all of our robots working together with some of our partners' robots, but there's humans still there. Like there's humans on the floor, there's humans in the control room. It's definitely going to be sort of a co-working piece. But yeah, we need managers and leaders and thinkers about how do we apply this technology in the most effective way, and how do we take advantage of the productivity gains, the safety gains, the accuracy gains that come from all of this. And it allows humans, right? It allows a company the opportunity now to sort of, change their resources and redeploy resources in more strategic ways. Studying data analytics, studying performance data, looking at patterns and thinking critically. Those are all things that humans excel at, and I don't see that being replaced anytime soon.
Yeah, for sure. And when you and I were first talking about doing this interview, I think I was sharing with you, I was kind of struggling with what angle should we focus on? Do we focus on the ERP implementation that we're helping you in Boston Dynamics with, or do we focus on the robotics piece of it and how robotics can be used and how you guys are seeing manufacturers use robotics? We decided to focus on the manufacturing piece of it.
Yeah.
But I do want to ask you just one question around your own digital transformation, because on one hand, you guys are selling a product here that enables true transformations for manufacturers and other types of organizations, but you guys yourselves are going through your own digital transformation, your own ERP project. Can you just tell us a little bit about that at a high level? Kind of what is it? What's leading you down this path? This is obviously Third Stage and Boston Dynamics are working together on this project, on this initiative, but tell us a little bit about that if you don't mind.
Sure. We run our entire business on Salesforce, including our ERP system is something called Rootstock. And as a CIO and an IT practitioner, I have what I'd like to describe as nirvana, that I have a single customer object, a single product object, a single order object. And I've never had that before, right? It was always in multiple systems, and I would be focused on integrations and how do I move a lead to an opportunity, into an order, into a case. Like, I never had that before, right? You were always doing all this integration. We have no integration, right? Because it's all done on the same platform, and that was by design, right? When I came into Boston Dynamics, I had implemented SAP a number of times, just about every module. I had implemented NetSuite. I implemented Oracle eBusiness Suite. I had run Microsoft Dynamics and Infor Sightline. And I said, I want to do something different. And fortunately, I aligned very, very well with our leadership team here when we came in the door and said, we don't want to do the SAP Oracle thing. Like, that was my CEO's, like, his mandate was like, I don't want to do it. And I think they were just scared, right, of what they had heard over the years, because they had never done it either. They had all worked here at Boston Dynamics, and I think they ran the business on QuickBooks. And so getting an opportunity to build out Salesforce and Rootstock on the Salesforce platform was extraordinary, and it's the backbone of what we do. The project that we're working on now is really about how do we make it better, right? It's been 5 years. We've grown considerably as a company, and how do we better tune our ERP environment to support the scale that we want and to support the business needs that have evolved over time. I'll tie robotics and ERP here for a second, right? Eric, I've been a fan of you, long before third stage. And the thing that I always like about your methodology, and that I, preach to my own teams, is sort of like, you got to get good at current state analysis. Like, you got to understand sort of how do you do things today. Then you also have to have a future vision of what it is that you want to do, so that you can identify the gaps and create a plan to get there. And I've gone through this cycle probably 4 times in the last 15 years, where we do a very determined and focused current state analysis, understanding what the future might look like, and then what are the gaps to get there. And maybe it's buying a new ERP system, or maybe it's putting together a tiger team to go and invest in certain areas to do it. Robotics, I think, is very much going to be the same thing. Like, what is your current state? What are the things that you're doing today? What are the problems that you're trying to solve? And then how do robots fit into that as a means to, improve worker efficiency, improve company productivity and accuracy, and all of those things. And without that solid current state and future vision, robots are just going to be a shiny, button that sits in the corner, and we let it dance every now and again. And that's not at all what we want to do here.
Right. Although it does make for great YouTube videos.
Oh, sure does. Oh, absolutely does.
Well, that's super interesting. And I'd love to have you back on the podcast to talk more specifically in a lot more detail around that transformation and sort of some of your battle wounds from having been through this a few times now. Sure. On your own digital transformation journeys. But thanks for that brief overview in the meantime. Well, I appreciate you being here today. This is a super interesting conversation, and time flies when you're having fun and talking about robots. We've got a lot of questions we didn't get to, but hopefully we can cover some of those in a follow-up session. But how can people learn more about what are the best ways to learn more about Boston Dynamics and to connect with you?
Well, certainly you can find me on LinkedIn. Happy to have these conversations. It's an area that I'm really passionate about. Visit us online at our website, bostondynamics.com. There's case studies out there. Like you said earlier, Eric, subscribe to our YouTube channel or TikTok, Instagram. Follow us in any of those locations. We're always dropping really amazing videos. Usually there's a little strategy behind when we do it, which is always really fun. But my message for everybody is, as we think about the use of robotics in the work that we do, and it doesn't just necessarily have to be around, manufacturing and the other industries that we talked about. It really could be anywhere. But I always tell people that the sooner that we can begin to think about robots as co-pilots and not adversaries, is the sooner we can adopt this technology into our jobs and into our home lives. And it's just going to be a really, really incredible future that I'm really looking forward to.
Yeah, super exciting. And it's got to be super exciting for you to be sort of on the forefront of that whole movement.
Sure is.
Yeah, that's very cool. All right. Well, thank you again, Chad. That was a great conversation. Thank you to the audience for the great questions. we've got some follow-up topics we want to cover as a follow-on to that conversation. But first, we're going to take a quick break. We'll be back with more Transformation Ground Control.
I'm excited to announce the release of our 2025 Digital Transformation Report. It's available now on the Third Stage Consulting website, www.thirdstage-consulting.com. This report gives you an unbiased, technology-agnostic insight to help you optimize your organization's projects for success. Get your copy today using the QR code in front of me or on our website.
Are you looking for ways to promote your product or service to enterprise technology decision makers and influencers throughout the world, like the ones who listen to this podcast? Major Tom Productions creates media, events, and influencer marketing for B2B technology providers. Our productions are exciting, educational, disruptive, and effective. Most importantly, they create results. Our content is unlike any other in this industry, engaging, influential, and trusted by technology buyers and influencers throughout the world. Each month, our productions reach hundreds of thousands of targeted buyers and decision makers who trust and engage with our honest and tech-agnostic content. With long-tail viral results and engagement with our content, Major Tom Productions provides a way to reach your target market and create awareness, calls to action, and a connection with potential customers. So collaborate with us today. Learn how we can feature your product or service on podcasts such as Transformation Ground Control, Journey to S/4HANA, and Journey to Dynamics 365. We can also feature your brand on our YouTube channel called Digital Transformation with Eric Kimberling, which boasts over 100,000 subscribers and over 2 million video views per year. You can also participate in our in-person events, including our Digital Stratosphere Conference. Contact us today to learn more. We can tailor a marketing campaign that works for you. We look forward to helping more people learn more about and become engaged with your brand.
Hello and welcome back to Transformation Ground Control, episode number 215. My name is Eric Kimberling here with Darian Chwialkowski. You can find new episodes of this show every Wednesday at transformationgroundcontrol.com. The show is sponsored by Third Stage Consulting and produced by Major Tom Productions. And this is a podcast that covers everything related to digital transformation, including robotics now. That was our first time covering robotics in any great detail. That was a really interesting conversation with Chad, but I'm curious to hear what you think, Darian.
Yeah, that was a really great conversation. I think we learned a lot from him. And I just like getting the insight from him as well on what all their robots are doing in the world. And I think it goes back to what we talked about earlier in the podcast about people fearing, AI or robots or whatever it is, of tech developing and taking their job. And I feel like he really reframed that narrative, where robots aren't replacing people, they're augmenting them, especially in industries struggling with labor shortages, or where the robots are handling the dull, dirty, and dangerous tasks. And I thought that was a really interesting point of view as well. But from your perspective, are companies beginning to see automation more as retention and a safety tool rather than a threat? And are you seeing any industries adopt that mindset faster than others? I know he maybe mentioned, manufacturing and those kinds of things, but what do you see as well?
Yeah, well, it's really interesting because one of the audience members asked a question around this too, or made a comment around how before the pandemic, and certainly after the pandemic, it's even more true that there was a shortage of labor, especially in warehouses and manufacturing shop floors and whatnot. And I think that's the key thing here is this is a, kind of a different time that we're seeing all this automation, because if we were in a position where there's a lot of unemployed people or there are plenty of workers to go around, then yeah, this might feel like more of a threat. But what we see with most of our clients is that they're struggling to find people and keep people. So, the average manufacturer, the average distribution center, it's not like they're flush with tons of options with their employee base. They're struggling to fill some key roles. So I think more than anything, it's just going to allow them to maybe do more with the same amount of people without necessarily having to replace every single vacant spot, on their employee base. It's been a long time. I mean, it's probably been like 15 or 20 years since I feel like there's been a real trend towards layoffs and labor costs and things like that. I mean, I remember when I was early in my consulting career, it seemed like that was more of a focus where companies would just focus more on headcount reductions. But now it's pretty rare that companies think that way because they're hurting so much as it is, and they're spread so thin as it is. So I think I think you just look at the facts, and hopefully it's a little less overwhelming to people.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to kind of switch gears into when you guys were talking about smart factories and how he was like, well, the thing about future of jobs is that, especially in these factories, they still need smart people to run, even if robots are in there, run them. And it's not just about adding automation, but it's expanding human capability as well. Have you seen companies actually create these kinds of roles yet? And if so, what skills are becoming the most important in a robotic augmented workforce?
Yeah. Well, I think robotics combined with AI, combined with the trend towards data analytics and things like that, I think it's pushing more people into more of a knowledge-based role. So, you think about even like the average shop floor worker, the average shop floor worker or skilled laborer in general is actually doing a lot less manual labor than they ever did in the past. They're still considered blue collar workers. They're still considered manual laborers by many. And in many cases, they still are doing a certain amount of manual labor. But now, instead of doing every single physical activity themselves, they're operating machinery and other things. And they have to know how to operate that machinery. They have to know what to do with information that they're getting from the machinery. They have to interact with the machinery. So it's just changing people's jobs quite a bit. And so it requires a certain amount of upskilling, or I don't even want to call it upskilling like it's a bad thing if you don't have it. It's just more reskilling. Maybe that's a better way to put it. Is you're reskilling people's qualifications or their capabilities, and you're also redefining their jobs. You're sort of redefining how you want them to be working. If you don't want them to be doing manual labor with every single step being done with their hands, you need to show them how to use that equipment to do things differently. And the same is true with AI and robotics and all the stuff we've been talking about in this episode so far.
Yeah, absolutely. And overall, I think the conversation did a great job showing that robotics isn't just about automation, it's about transformation, especially when it comes to companies. So one final question for you. What's your advice to organizations that are just starting to explore robotics or AI in the workplace? Where should they start? And what's the biggest mindset shift that they need to make?
Well, I think first of all is to not try to boil the ocean, not try to feel like it's all or nothing. Either we go deploy hundreds or thousands of robots through our organization, or we do nothing. You can take a more agile, more piecemeal approach to sort of trying different use cases, picking off areas of low-hanging fruit, testing it, optimizing it, figuring it out and learning from it, and then rolling it out at scale once you've gotten some momentum behind it. So I think not feeling like you have to do it all at once is one thing. And then the second thing is just make sure you have a real clear purpose and business case for it. How, if you're not going to eliminate headcount, which we talked about, which is probably true for a lot of people listening, they're probably not doing this because they want to reduce headcount. You're still expecting some sort of ROI. You're probably not just going to go invest in robots because, like Chad said, they made it look human and you have this human emotional connection with them. That's probably not enough of a business case. You probably need something more than that. So, you just need to justify, well, how will this make us better? How would it allow us to produce more without necessarily needing to hire more headcount, or how will it allow us to sell more, or whatever the case may be. So I think that's the other part of it, is just having a clear purpose and business case for what it is you want to do, and letting that drive your decision-making and your plan going forward.
Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, like I said, a great conversation. It was fun to talk about robotics versus some typical stuff that we talk about. So it was a good mix.
Yeah, it was really good stuff. And we're going to sort of transition straight into this concept of agentic AI and whether or not it's going to reduce human decision making. And there's actually a question that came up with Chad during the interview where someone said, actually, it might have been you that asked a question around, are we going to have robots that are people that are managing the robots, and how is it going to change what people are doing in that regard? So this is agentic AI. And then someone else was actually asking too around, or you asked at the beginning of this episode about Sarbanes-Oxley and, how can we ensure that AI is being compliant with laws and regulations and things of that nature. So it begs the question, is agentic AI potentially going to take away our human decision-making? And I would say in the short term or in the near future, I'd say absolutely not. It's hard to imagine a world where maybe someday it will, but who knows? I can't predict the future that well when it comes to this stuff. But what I wanted to do is we want to roll and play for you this clip from my YouTube channel where I talk about what agentic AI is, as well as how it might affect people's jobs and their decision-making going forward. So we'll roll you this clip from my YouTube channel, and then we'll talk about it here in just a second.
Increasingly over time, we're seeing a lot more AI work with our clients. And one of the common buzzwords you may have heard of in this space is agentic AI. By now, most of you are probably familiar with AI, maybe use ChatGPT or Copilot or Baird, any of the AI tools that are out there that are being commonly used. But what's really interesting is that businesses are starting to see an interesting use of AI in a newer category called agentic AI. And what agentic AI does that's different than regular AI or the traditional AI that you might be familiar with is that it can make decisions and it can take action without any sort of human intervention. So it really automates workflows, decision-making, and allows the technology to operate independently of humans. And this is a really groundbreaking technology because it's going to automate and change the world as we know it, specifically in areas like software development, customer service, predictive maintenance. You think about a factory shop floor and being able to use agentic AI to solve problems before something breaks or before there's a problem on the shop floor. So there's a lot of different ways that agentic AI is going to completely transform the business world as we know it. So in today's video, I want to talk about what agentic AI is, share with you some use cases of how it's being used to automate businesses and improve businesses, and also talk about some of the risks and considerations you could keep in mind. Before we dive too far into today's content, I want to share a little bit of information about Third Stage Consulting and who we are. Third Stage Consulting Group is an independent technology agnostic provider of consulting services to help clients through their digital transformations. We help with digital strategy and software selection, as well as implementation planning. And during implementation, we provide services related to program management, organizational change, business process improvement, as well as enterprise architecture. These are just some of the services we provide. We have offices in North America as well as Europe and Asia Pacific. So if you'd like to learn more, I encourage you to check out our resource center, which includes a number of resources that will help you through your digital transformation. And you can access that for free using the QR code here or the links below. You can also reach out to me directly if you'd like to discuss your digital transformation and brainstorm ideas on how to improve where you're headed on your journey. Now let's jump back into today's content. So let's start with what agentic AI is. Agentic AI is a tool that can set goals, it can take actions and make decisions, and ultimately do follow-up workflows without any sort of human intervention. So whereas we used to use AI to interact with and ask it questions and have it produce stuff for us under our direction, agentic AI is totally different in that it's using AI to replace humans in the whole decision-making process. For example, if inventory stock is running low in a warehouse, agentic AI could make the decision to reorder more of that particular product. I'm going to get into a lot more use cases later in this video, but that's essentially what it is. Another way to think about agentic AI is if you compare it to driving cars. Traditional AI is like GPS. It's giving you technology, it's giving you information that the human can use to make decisions, whereas agentic AI would be more like a self-driving car. It's making decisions, it's turning, it's picking up external data, it's responding to external data, it's continuously learning, and it's continuously optimizing how it drives the car. So that's really the difference if you think about that analogy, the difference between GPS and a self-driving car. That's the best way to think about the difference between agentic AI and traditional AI. Now, there are a few different capabilities of agentic AI that are worth noting. They're important to understand as it relates to this concept. One is gathering and processing data, looking to internal data and external data and learning from that data, processing that data. Second is decision making. It can take that external and internal information that's gathering and processing, and it can make decisions just as a human would based on the information it's collecting. Third is action execution. Based on what it learns from the data it's gathered, it can now take action that it deems best based on all the inputs it has gathered so far. And then finally is feedback. It continuously learns from its own feedback. So it's continuously gathering more data. It might make some mistakes along the way, and it learns from those mistakes to where it can continuously get better at making decisions and taking actions as a follow-up. So this is a high-level overview of agentic AI, but the next question is, what are some real-world examples of how agentic AI is being used to improve businesses throughout the world? And that's what I'll talk about next. There are a whole host of examples of how agentic AI can and is already being used by organizations throughout the world. One example is in supply chain management. You think about all the disruptions that can happen to a supply chain, whether it's related to weather, whether it's related to labor union strikes or macroeconomic factors, geopolitical issues. There's a lot of different things that can disrupt a global supply chain. And what agentic AI can do and is doing for some supply chains is making decisions based on information it gathers. If it gathers information about a potential hurricane in a certain part of the world that disrupts a route of a ship that's shipping product, it can reroute that ship and make that decision on its own without human intervention. In the past, we would have relied on tribal knowledge and human intervention to reroute that ship to go around the storm, but now agentic AI can do that for us. Another example is AI conversational assistance, much like a chatbot. If you ever go to a website where you're chatting with someone through the chatbot on the support website, agentic AI can actually do a lot of that heavy lifting from a customer support perspective without needing human intervention. So if you have a product you'd like to return, it can process that return for you. If you have a quality issue or a problem, it can answer those questions for you or solve those problems for you. And it can take actions based on what it is you tell it and based on the information it's gathered and learned throughout its history being an agentic AI bot within that customer support realm. Another example or use case of how agentic AI is being used is in manufacturing and warehouses. When combined with robotics, agentic AI can direct robots to get inventory at certain times and take inventory to certain places based on information it's gathered. It can also optimize the flow of goods throughout a warehouse. It can also identify potential bottlenecks on a factory floor. It can also change a production run to accommodate a spike in demand and react to some of the information it's gathering from the outside world as well as within the four walls of the manufacturing shop floor. There's a lot of different ways that agentic AI is being used in manufacturing and warehouses, especially when you combine it with robotics and other types of Industry 4.0 solutions. So these are just a handful of examples of how agentic AI is being used to make businesses better. But I'd love to hear from you. Are you seeing any specific use cases or examples of where agentic AI is being used, or do you have any ideas on how you might use agentic AI within your organization or another person's organization? I'd love to hear your comments in the chat below and see what your thoughts are. But now that we have a better understanding of some examples of how agentic AI is being used, let's talk about the risks and other considerations that need to be taken into account. Despite all the upside potential of agentic AI, there are downside risks, both ethically and in other ways too. First is the basic fundamental question of how much human oversight should agentic AI have? At what point should humans intervene? At what point do we let agentic AI just run free? What parameters do we put in place? Those are all questions that the world hasn't quite figured out yet because they're still getting used to what agentic AI can do for them. There's also bias and errors. Despite the power of AI, it's still not perfect. It still has inaccurate information. It still has hallucinations. It can still have biases because it's collecting information from humans who are inherently biased. One of the best examples I can think of how AI bias might affect a business in a bad way is discriminating against certain employees or potential employees in the recruiting process. And it could be that it was trained in a biased way and therefore it's discriminating unintentionally against candidates that might be applying for a certain job. There's also security risks, and this is something that's not talked about often, but agentic AI can expose your organization to exponentially more cybersecurity risks. The reason being is that even if your core systems are completely locked down and you've got the tightest security in place possible, the agentic AI bots are now new potential entry points for cybersecurity attacks. So that they can get into or attack one of your agentic AI bots, that could be a backdoor to get into some of your other core systems because your AI bot is integrated to those solutions, presumably. So that's something that needs to be considered as well, especially with the proliferation of cybersecurity issues as it is even before AI became a thing. And then finally, there's regulatory challenges. It's still largely to be determined how or if government entities throughout the world are going to regulate AI. How much are they going to allow AI to, for example, displace workers? How much are they going to allow AI to make decisions that may or may not be in the best interest of society? These are all things that are years away from being resolved, but it's something to be aware of as you think about your AI strategy going forward. So the future of agentic AI is that it's looking increasingly like agentic AI is going to become a coworker for most of us. A lot of us may have an agentic AI companion that we work with. In fact, I think Elon Musk is predicting that there will be more AI bots out there than there are humans in the world in the not too distant future. And that's a pretty interesting thought. Agentic AI is also going to disrupt digital transformations and the way we think about digital transformations. We used to think of digital transformation as prepackaged commercial off-the-shelf software built and configured a certain way. You put it in and you just use it for the next 10 to 20 years. Agentic AI is a totally different mindset. It's a totally different way of thinking about digital transformation. And quite frankly, it opens up a limitless world of possibilities in how you might transform your business in a way that no prepackaged ERP or CRM or supply chain system ever could. And then perhaps the $1 million question, the biggest question we all have is, what does this mean to us as human workers? Are we going to lose our jobs? Should we be afraid? I'd love to hear feedback on that, by the way. Or will agentic AI just make our jobs easier? Maybe it won't displace us as workers, but it might just make our jobs easier. It might make us more effective at our jobs. So there's a lot of unknown risks and ethical considerations we need to work through as a society. We're not quite there yet, but the good news is that AI, in the meantime, agentic AI can provide some pretty significant capabilities. I'm curious to hear from you, though. What do you think the future of agentic AI holds? How do you see agentic AI being used in organizations, whether it's yours or your peers' organizations? I'd love to hear your feedback in the comments below.
So that was a clip from my YouTube channel where I talk about agentic AI and how it affects human decision-making. What were some of your thoughts and questions as a follow-up to that, Darian?
Yeah, I think you did a really good job explaining like the typical difference between traditional AI like ChatGPT or Copilot versus agentic AI. I think that's something that a lot of people maybe don't realize. And I think when you compared it to a GPS versus a self-driving car, that really put in perspective like, oh, the difference there is pretty crazy. I do have a couple of follow-up questions for you today. One is, you mentioned agentic AI can make decisions and take action without any human input. From a business risk perspective, what types of guardrails should companies be thinking about before they fully trust this type of AI?
Yeah, well, like we talked about earlier in this episode, you can't expect AI to know right from wrong and to know and anticipate what it is you want. So, you can tell AI to do something, but it's not going to have the foresight or the reasoning capability to say, well, I know you want me to do that, but there's a certain law or regulation over here that might require a different approach, unless you've told it to consider it. If you told it specifically, like, take into account this specific set of laws and make decisions within that context, then yes, it will do it. It could do it then, but you can't expect it to read your mind or just assume that it's going to know that you want it to be compliant with, whatever laws and regulations or whatever expectations you might have for it on an individual level. So you still have to train it, you still have to teach it, and you still have to manage it.
Yeah, absolutely. One more question I have. One thing you mentioned was that this could totally change how we think about digital transformation. Does agentic AI make traditional ERP and CRM systems feel outdated? And are we heading toward a new type of architecture altogether?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'll be curious to see where ERP goes from here, because ERP's value, its primary value has historically been to be a transaction or a record of transactions. So it keeps track of data, it keeps track of transactions, it keeps all that information in one single database. Over the years, though, ERP has tried to become sexier and better user interface, better reporting, better dashboards, and all that stuff, which has been great. But now AI is just a whole nother thing. I mean, it's just a whole new way of engaging with technology, with asking conversational questions, conversational AI versus having to remember where to look in a system for a specific report. Now you can just ask AI to do it for you. And so it's just completely disrupting how we think about ERP systems potentially. It also takes a lot of the leverage away from ERP vendors, or a lot of the focus away from ERP products from being the sole or the core system. I think over time, AI is actually going to become the center of gravity for organizations. Where the data resides, though, that's the part that I don't fully understand. I don't know if there might be a role, maybe a more limited role for ERP systems in the future, where it ends up being more of like a database of information, but you don't use it to run reports or to really engage with it much, other than to use AI to make decisions or to analyze or to get information or whatever. So I'll be curious to see how that evolves, but I do think ERP's role and importance in organizations is going to be significantly diminished in the coming years.
Yeah, absolutely. But what a great episode, talking about a lot of fun things today. So it was a great episode. I feel like I learned a lot.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. It was straight out of Terminator or something. It was sort of like, as a kid, this is the stuff you imagine as a kid, and now here we are. It's actually happening. So it's fun to talk about and see how different companies are tackling this stuff. Thank you for a great episode, Darian. Thank you to the audience for being here today. Look forward to our next conversation next week. We put out new episodes of this podcast every Wednesday. Be sure to go to transformationgroundcontrol.com to see all the past episodes you might have missed. And also go to transformationgroundcontrol.com to learn more about upcoming episodes too. So be sure to, you could subscribe to whatever platform you want there as well. The show is produced by Major Tom Productions, sponsored by Third Stage Consulting. If you'd like to learn about how Third Stage Consulting can help you with your digital transformation, please feel free to reach out. I've included my contact information below. Would love to have a conversation with you about how we can help support your journey. So hope you all have a great week. We'll look forward to seeing you next week on the next episode of Transformation Ground Control. Take care.